is he put out an absolutely loathsome video where he just trash talked Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, trying to steal the news cycle, with his insults, with his disinformation, with his slander. And that's what Trump will do. We expect Trump will do that. But there is no high ground here that Donald Trump will take over this. There is no high ground that the Republicans, I think, will take over this. Because I got to be honest with you, there's no high ground for America here right now.
Mm.
You do have a frail president, but on the other hand, you've got a convicted felon, you've got a sex offender, you've got a fraudster, you've got a man who tried to stage a coup less than 4 years ago, and you've got a serial liar. And there's no high ground between those two choices.
Well, let's speak to Scott Lucas, Professor of US and International Politics at the Clinton Institute at the University of Dublin. Scott, a good afternoon to you.
New to you, Callum.
Is this now a question of when rather than if Joe Biden removes himself as the candidate for the Democratic Party? And I do think it's important that we distinguish the candidacy from his current presidency.
I think, Callum, that the next 4 days are critical, maybe decisive. Tomorrow night, Joe Biden has a primetime TV interview with one of the leading political hosts in America, George Stephanopoulos. Tomorrow, he has a rally in one swing state, Wisconsin. And then on Sunday, he has a rally in another swing state, which is Pennsylvania. Uh, I think Democratic donors, activists, legislators, strategists will be looking at how he does, and they'll be looking at polling reaction, private polling reaction over the weekend. If he can make it through with a measure of confidence, a measure of capability, uh, then I think he may be able to continue running. If he stumbles or if the polls indicate that he has no chance of winning against Donald Trump, I think by the end of next week, he will be asked in what Richard Schiff called that stunning act of patriotism for the good of America to prevent an autocrat named Donald Trump from getting back into the White House. Please step aside.
Wow. And so this weekend, then, which has the TV interview and some campaign events scheduled, is designed really as a test. It's about seeing if Joe Biden's up to it.
Well, I think the rallies were already in place,
Okay.
Callum, but I do think the interview on Friday was arranged with George Stephanopoulos. I'm old enough to remember back in 1992 when Bill Clinton's candidacy was threatened by the revelations of his affairs. And you might remember the "Stand by Your Man" moment where Hillary Clinton was alongside Bill in a primetime interview with a leading American host, and that rescued his candidacy. Of course, the situations are far different between Bill Clinton's affairs and Joe Biden's woeful debate performance. But the upshot is, yeah, that you have these moments, these water cooler moments in American politics that are make or break. And I think this weekend is make or break for Biden.
Well, how do we reconcile, Scott, perhaps the paradox then that we may face next week, which is that Joe Biden declares himself unfit to be candidate and to be president for another 4 years, but remains as president until January for the next kind of 6 months or so? Is that not something of an odd dilemma for voters in the US, but also in a kind of global sense? If people are looking on and saying, this guy's now total lame duck, he's got no power, no influence. He himself says he's not up to the job.
I think the way it'll be framed, Calvin, probably rightly, is that look, you know, the grueling, the demands of a campaign for 4 months, being on the road all the time, the constant travel is just simply wearing and just simply too taxing. It does not take away from his achievements of 3.5 years, probably the most significant legislation in American history since the 1960s. It doesn't take away from what the administration has done on the economic front, the social front, in terms of foreign policy. So Biden could still be in office till next January as a one-term president, which is what he said he would do. In fact, back in 2021, before he changed his mind, he could come in, have a good one term as president. He could then step aside, hand over to someone, whether it's Vice President Kamala Harris, whether it's one of the leading governors like Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom, and hold his head high that he has indeed been stunning in what he has done for the country, but that he has also been stunning in recognizing that doing it for another 4 years might be too much.
Yeah. What should the Republican strategy be here, Scott? Because it would be easy for them to jump on this. It strikes me that they're perhaps not really doing that at this point. Is there a part of this where the kind of, to use the word that's coming up a lot on our program this morning, the patriotism of all of this means that Republicans can look past the reality of what is happening in light of the seriousness of what is happening and the gravity with which the office of the president should be treated? Is that what the Republicans are doing, or will this flip at some point and Donald Trump will rinse this as part of his campaigning strategy?
No, I don't think that's what's happening, Callum. I think, and I'm going to distinguish between Republicans and Donald Trump.
Mm.
I think Republicans are largely silent on this. I think a lot of them are worried about what lies ahead for America, both because of Joe Biden and because of Trump. Now, what Trump has done, and unfortunately, certain media outlets are giving it a lot of publicity, is he put out an absolutely loathsome video where he just trash talked Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, trying to steal the news cycle, with his insults, with his disinformation, with his slander. And that's what Trump will do. We expect Trump will do that. But there is no high ground here that Donald Trump will take over this. There is no high ground that the Republicans, I think, will take over this. Because I got to be honest with you, there's no high ground for America here right now.
Mm.
You do have a frail president, but on the other hand, you've got a convicted felon, you've got a sex offender, you've got a fraudster, you've got a man who tried to stage a coup less than 4 years ago, and you've got a serial liar. And there's no high ground between those two choices, which is why, at least personally, I think Joe Biden should step aside. I think
Okay.
otherwise, in this most important election since 1865, America faces, I think, a moment of reckoning.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. It is good to speak to you, Scott. That is Scott Lucas. And of course, in terms of the sexual assault, rather than a conviction, he was found liable in that case. It's just a slight legal nuance that's worth highlighting. That's Scott Lucas, Professor of US and International Politics at the Clinton Institute at the University of Dublin.
I give you my word as a Biden, I would not be running again if I didn't believe with all my heart and soul I can do this job. Because quite frankly, the stakes are too high. The stakes are too high. Donald Trump is a genuine threat to this nation.